Hi everyone, Kathy Rose here, and I'm going to talk to you about the astrological patterns for March 2026. Well, we have a saturation of Pisces energy this month, not only because the sun is traveling through that sign, but we also have Mercury retrograde in Pisces until the 20th of the month. And we have Mars in Pisces. And for the beginning of the month, we're going to have Venus in Pisces. So if you look on screen for the mandala, you can feel the the frequency of spirituality, compassion. It's very abstract. It's very much oriented to flow and emotion. And you can see, even as I tune into Pisces energy, it's hard for me to find words. Well, this is the fuzziness of Pisces. So let me explain how this works for us as we go through the month. Let's first look at the themes for the month. It says, Hello, Spring. Well, in the Northern Hemisphere, indeed, we do begin the season of spring when we hit the equinox. In the Southern Hemisphere, of course, it's going to be the beginning of fall. But the bottom line on this is if you are sensitive to seasonal change, which I recommend you start paying attention to this because it is a new flow of energy that begins when the sun enters a cardinal sign, in this case, when it enters Aries on the 20th. And there is a surge of growth. There's new energy that circulates. So in March, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the trees starting to bud or bloom or the leaves starting to grow. It's nature waking back up. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, then it's the change that happens in the completion growth cycle as you enter fall. But for on a larger level, astrologically, the themes of March, we have action and intuition working together. Not only the seasonal change that's happening, that's going to be in the air, but action and intuition merging, which means you're stepping out of your head and overthinking, and you're allowing your body to move with the flow. And this is going to be very strong for March. Surrender to the flow. Let it let heart-centered flow move through you, and that's because of all those planets in Pisces. But there's always that Aries point visibility in the background happening right now, with Saturn and Neptune in the early degrees of Aries. And this is saying something very important, which is whatever needs to become visible will become visible. And that can be in the news cycle, politically or otherwise. It's this active point of bringing what's been hidden into public view. So that'll be going on at the same time as all of this Pisces spirituality. So let's take a look at the first lunation of the month, and this is going to be an eclipse in Virgo. It's a full moon on March 3rd. Now remember, eclipses always travel in pairs. We had the first eclipse, which was the new moon in Aquarius, which was on February 17th. And perhaps maybe you watched my video on that. I did a video with my friend Agnes Belesne, and we really deeply looked at that eclipse and the long range activation points for it. And we talked about how the eclipse in February, set for Washington, D.C., had planets on angles. And we see it again with the chart on screen, which is also set for Washington, D.C. And again, my theory is that when we have a lunation or an eclipse set for the capital of a nation and we find planets on angles, it usually suggests a lot of development, a lot of change, or a lot of activity happening for that nation. Not always bad activity, not always good. It depends, but it's movement. So we see that during this eclipse at 12 degrees Virgo. Now, what's interesting on a personal note, so if I speak to you about how can you use this eclipse in your own personal life, then we have this statement that is loud and clear here. Of all those planets in Pisces on the left side of the screen, we have Mars, nodal axis, Sun, Mercury, Venus in Pisces. Mercury is retrograde at 20 degrees, opposite that lonely little moon in Virgo. But what this really is talking about is bringing the mountaintop consciousness into the marketplace. And what I mean by that is, it's really easy to be spiritual and harmonious and peaceful when you're on the mountaintop meditating. Um, with your eyes closed, when you have that beautiful setting around you. But it's much more of a challenge to trigger that mountaintop consciousness when you are in the middle of the city, when you're around a lot of people or agitation or traffic or stress. That's one of the messages that is so powerful right now with this eclipse in Virgo. Sure, we could talk about things that you do with moon in Virgo. Well, you clean your house, you organize, you watch your diet, you work on your physical health. But this is talking about increasing your spiritual health and bringing it into your daily habits. So be mindful of eyes open meditations. Be mindful of techniques you might have gathered for being able to relax on command if you're in a stressful situation or around situations where you're being triggered. This is incredibly important. And let me show you in the next screen another way to represent this. I've talked about this concept of spiritual self-sufficiency being a very important theme in 2026, and not just 2026. Neptune in Aries will be going on for 14 years. We are beginning a new cycle. And Neptune in Aries is talking about connecting with your inner technology, your inner spiritual skills, and making that a priority. So, in other words, rather than automatically finding somebody who channels beings from other dimensions or can tell you what your guides are saying, you go in and get that information yourself. And you know that you can, or you teach yourself how to do that, or you learn to trust those signals. This is a very important change that's happening with Neptune and Aries. Now, we can look at this practically and say, well, AI is really surging and it's going to continue to surge and become part of our life. And it's going to be very important for us to learn how to tune into what stories are true, what information is accurate, what information is AI generated or maybe distorted, and what's real. So, spiritual self sufficiency is very much connected with this eclipse in Virgo that is being triggered and activated. Um, so, tune into that. Be courageous enough to know you have the ability to get your own answers, connect with the higher levels, and march it forward. And then here we have continued development that is saying the same thing. On March 6th, Venus is going to enter Aries. The image that's on screen is an image I created a long time ago. I call it the goddess lotus. It's very much connected to the goddess energy, but I felt a lot of empowerment. It's the feminine energy standing firm and strong with inner belief, with confidence, with power. And that is one thing that as Venus enters Aries and then conjoins Neptune and Saturn. So we're going to start feeling this around March 6th, and it's going to be very strong till about mid-month. Specifically with just this little Venus cycle. But it's going to be absolutely activating and echoing the larger theme that is happening. So as Venus conjoins Neptune and Saturn in Aries, I'll show you on the next screen something I've talked about in other videos. Maybe you've heard me mentioning this, and I did a big Facebook post on it recently. And that is how important it is going to be, especially for women, to release imposter syndrome, to become aware if that's an active principle, and to let it go. This is a time frame with Saturn and Neptune in Aries for 26 and 27, and then Neptune staying in Aries for 12 more years beyond that. It is a super powerful period for women to embrace their capability, their expertise, their confidence in their own special way. You know, because women naturally flow energy from the universe, naturally are in touch with intuitive insight and concepts. And sometimes it's hard for us to actually prove where our expertise or wisdom flows from. And so during this time, it is so important to believe in ourselves. This is necessary congruency in our expertise, becoming congruent, and releasing doubt. Now, this little transit that happens in March with Venus and Aries hitting Saturn and Neptune is an active principle. It's triggering it. And you may be feeling it. I'm having all kinds of female clients out of the blue now saying, I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome and I really don't like it and I want to get rid of it. And it's true. It's coming up. It needs to be released and we need to move on. And in addition to Venus in Aries activating the Saturn and Neptune principle, we also have two other things that are happening mid-month that complicate the situation in actually a very beautiful way. On March 10th, Jupiter ends the retrograde in Cancer. And from March 10th until late June or early July, Jupiter's going to be surging through the second half of the sign Cancer, finishing the transit. And then Jupiter will enter Leo, the fire sign. So Jupiter in Cancer is quite beautiful. It's nurturing, it's compassionate, it's family oriented, it's intuitive. It is energizing the feminine energy, the feminine principle, I should say. And in addition to this profound surge of Jupiter energy as it ends the retrograde, we're going to have Mercury conjoining Mars. Mercury will still be retrograde, but conjoining Mars at 10 degrees Pisces. And that just means that the active principle of making decisions with our intuition and flow and abstract consciousness and action are moving together. So action and intuition work together, as I said on the very first slide. And the image that's on screen is a plant that has a beautiful little flower bud getting ready to bloom. And if you tune into this picture, this is representing that energy that's happening all through March, which is a bloom that wants to take place spiritually. Our spiritual techniques and powers, our ability to manage our state of mind, our ability to have energetic hygiene so that we don't absorb everybody else's energy. Our intuitive faculties, being able to get important information, our ability to create relaxation when we need it. This is all very strong at this time when Jupiter's ending the retrograde. And we still have Mercury retrograde, bringing about, and again, see, now I'm tuning into the Pisces energy and I go fuzzy, but it is intuitive energy. And yes, it can be a bit fuzzy, but it's very potent and we need to surrender and open to it, which then has a surge of energy. It's like in music when you have a crescendo. This is what's happening on March 18th when we have the new moon in Pisces. So if you're a musician and you've ever, I used to play in the orchestra, and when the whole orchestra would have a crescendo, you would feel it. You would feel that musical intensity, the volume level going up. And you would feel it in all your cells. And that's what this new moon in Pisces is doing on March 18th. It is making a very loud statement that says, honor and embrace the intuitive part of your being, your connection with the divine, the compassionate side of you that also is, very powerful. the spiritual warrior. You see during this new moon in Pisces, Neptune, Saturn, and Venus are in Aries, along with Chiron in Aries, of course. And yet we have all this water saturation with Sun, Moon in Pisces, Mars, Mercury in Pisces, and Jupiter still in Cancer. So again, it's like you step into your spiritual badass. I mean, really connected in your core, solid, powerful, strong, filled with heart flow or heart-centered flow and compassion and love, but yet courage and confidence. And I think this is a beautiful new moon in Pisces. So, on a personal note, right around the time of this new moon, practice flow, practice flexibility, practice learning how to retain your center. I mean, that's what Mercury retrograde is always about. In particular, this one in Pisces. By the way, Mercury began the retrograde February 26th. It ends the retrograde on March 20th. It stays in Pisces even into April, so we're not done with the Mercury and Pisces flow. But this is when we all need to learn how to pivot with grace. I mean, that's one thing that is being stated here in this new moon in Pisces, to pivot with grace, you know, to have that kind of flexibility, again, where you surrender to the flow, where you're not attached to things working out a certain way, but you move with the current. What a great statement for a new moon in Pisces, especially at the very end of the sign, right? Wow. So then we have an energy shift on March 20th where we have the Aries equinox, the beginning of spring in the north, the beginning of fall in the south. But Aries equinox is the Aries point. This is when the sun hits 0 degrees of Aries. And what comes forward is the new season. And the image on screen is an image my friend Liza did, and I helped with this image, and it clearly represents the equinox. But Mercury ends the retrograde. I think it's like 5 hours or so after the sun enters Aries. So it's this crisp, bright energy that's happening at that time. And it absolutely is saying action and intuition flow together. Use them together. My final thoughts for this month. I think this image says it all. This image is a person making this gigantic leap across this chasm. And so if you meditate on this image, if you think about what this person was thinking and feeling before they made the leap, certainly they're on the other side and they're visualizing, I can do this. They're visualizing being successful. They're making a decision. I am going to take this action and it will be successful. And so it's in their mind, it's in their heart and their energy. And then they take the action and they make the leap and then they feel great. Well, this is what's happening is this process we are all entering of not only believing in ourselves, but saying, okay, now I'm going to take the action to prove that how I believe in myself is accurate. And then feeling really good about your accomplishment. So we're going to see that in March. And certainly it begins with this intuitive knowingness that we can be successful, that we are supported, that we can calculate. For instance, with this leap, our body knows how to make this successful. That magical connection we have with the universe and instinct that all athletes know about, like the football player that just knows when to turn to catch the ball, or the quarterback who has this instinct of where to throw the ball so the receiver can get it. The same principle is showing up in this picture, making this leap and just having that intuitive calculation to be successful. Meditate on this because this is the active principle all through March. And this is why I say learn to bring the mountaintop consciousness into the city. Learn to live it. Don't separate your spirituality from your daily activities in life. Bring them into everything you do at the grocery store, driving in traffic, talking to your coworkers. Whatever you do, you're bringing that connection with the divine. That's what March is talking about. Activated powerfully at the Virgo eclipse, and then that spectacular new moon in Pisces. Wow. So I wish you much love during this super saturated, watery month of March, and many blessings coming to you. And when we get to April, and some of the planets move into Aries, and we have this change in dynamic. I look forward to talking to you about that. But for the month of March, enjoy. Enjoy this flow. All right. Much love, and I'll see you in April.